It's a sunny day in the town centre of Blackburn, and Lawrence Dunhill is the Telegraph health reporter, but not for long.
No, sadly, I've been here a couple of years, but I'll be moving on to the Health Services Journal in London at the end of April, which is a sort of specialist publication for people who work in the NHS. I'll be really sad to leave Blackburn and Darwin, though. I live in Darwin. I've got a nice flat there, and I'm getting pretty depressed about the house prices in London and what I'm going to have to pay to rent somewhere down there.
It's nice to know that we'll be missed, and I think you will be too. You certainly made a mark on the local health economy. Let me ask you, I'll put you on the spot. What about the local health economy? Do you think there's been much improvement over the last 2 years?
I think there's, in certain areas, there certainly has been. The hospital trust, East Lancashire Hospitals, NHS Trust, was in all sorts of difficulties. When I came to Blackburn in March 2013, it seemed the leadership there were very insular, didn't like people complaining about the service, didn't really seem to want to listen to patients or challenge some of the problems at the hospitals. They had real problems with the A&E there, with people waiting too long, and ultimately the mortality, the death rates were high. And soon after I came, they were inspected by some NHS officials who came up from London, and a lot of these problems were uncovered. The leadership were then given a bit of time to try and turn things around, but ultimately I don't think that happened quickly enough, and most of the board then left within about six to 12 months, and they were replaced, and I think they have now got good people in, and there have now been some significant improvements, and they seem a lot more outward facing, willing to listen to criticism, willing to be transparent. From my point of view, they've been much more open with me, which
Check it, that's made your job a lot easier.
it has made my job easier, but yeah, patients won't care about that. I think what that means for patients is you've got people in charge who are opening up and are willing to listen to criticism and improve services as a result. That they're not just stonewalling people.
Certainly
And
not
that's a good
perhaps
sign.
as defensive as they were once.
That's right, and when people are defensive, you often suspect that there are things going on behind the scenes that aren't quite right, and they have become less defensive, and that I think that is encouraging anyway. There are undoubtedly still some problems there, but I am pretty confident that they're being addressed. So as far as the hospital trust is concerned, I think patients can feel pretty comfortable that they're in good hands now.
I think that's the message generally, as chair of the Patient Voices group, that I'm getting to. That's the feeling. You will, of course, have come to Lancashire at a time when the clinical commissioning groups had just taken over as well. How has that impacted on what you do as a health reporter?
It's been difficult because everything changed in 2013. So we had doctors, clinical commissioning groups taking over health budgets. As a reporter, all it's meant is that things have got a lot more complicated. And I've also found that the clinical commissioning groups, the CCGs, have been very closed off and reluctant to speak to me, to communicate with me, and everything has to go through a central press office, which isn't part of the organisation. It's a separate company almost, who are paid to do their communications, and so it all takes a very long time to get any answers. And then when you do get answers, they're not really answers to the questions you asked, and they give as little information as they possibly can. Yet, when I find when I actually attend the board meetings and meet the directors and people in charge themselves, they're often absolutely fine. So it's frustrating because they build up these walls between themselves and the press, and I'm not sure it's all that helpful.
No, and that's something that you and I have talked about ad infinitum over the past 2 years. Lawrence, we've got the elections coming soon. How different do you think the NHS landscape is going to be after the elections, no matter which party gets in?
To be honest, all the parties are talking about the NHS and using it to back up their arguments, but in my opinion, it's not going to be all that different, whatever the government looks like. Unless we get some sort of radical government where UKIP might be involved, then who knows. But in terms of the Conservatives, Labour and Lib Dems, I think they're all signed up to the vision for the NHS, which has been put forward by Simon Stevens. And everyone within the health economy nationally, they're all signed up to that, and I think that they're all committed to seeing that through, and we've heard them all commit to the funding of it. I think they need about £8 billion extra. So I'm not sure it will make a massive difference what party is in power. You do have the issue of more private firms becoming involved in the NHS. That started under Labour and has continued under the Conservatives. I'm not sure it'll make a massive difference whoever's in charge.
So, as you do your swan song, you're leaving us in May, off to the big smoke. You've been reporting on health stories in Lancashire for the past 2 years. Really going to put you on the spot now. What is the one story that you've broken, perhaps, that's had the biggest impact, or one story that you springs to mind that you think has been important to you?
Probably the one I'm most proud of. I spent most of my 2 years concentrating on the hospitals, Royal Blackburn and Burnley General, but in recent months I've been focused more on Lancashire Care NHS Foundation Trust, which provides mental health services, and I've been contacted by a number of staff members who have raised concerns about the practices that are taking place on the wards. We've had incidents where patients have been mistreated or abused, and we've seen staff being suspended. But more generally, the staff seem to be too ready to use discredited techniques such as face-down restraint, which the Trust have now got rid of after our investigation. But there's still a problem with general restraint techniques, the use of seclusion areas, and rapid tranquilization where a patient is injected with a sedative drug. And all these techniques appear to be being used far too quickly, and staff are relying on them when longer term treatment methods are required to try
perhaps
and
they should be using other de-escalation techniques, perhaps.
That's right. They need to be more focused on de-escalation and treating patients as individuals. Finding out what works for each person rather than resorting to these quick fix practices which seems to have been happening.
So one final question to you. What drives you?
What drives me is, even if it's just in a small way, by scrutinising services and uncovering problems, it hopefully makes the people in charge put more effort and more energy into making improvements and making the services better, which benefits patients, benefits us all. I think knowing that they're being watched keeps them on their toes. But also I do have a little devil in me, I suppose, that when I think that people are lying or covering things up or pretending that things are better than they are, I want to expose that. And I want to pull them up on it.
Well, I think you have made a difference, certainly, over the last 2 years. So on behalf of the patients of Pennine, Lancashire and further afield, let me thank you for your input, your stories, and for all the difference that you have made to the people of Lancashire.
Thank you, Russ, and I'd like to thank you as well. You've been able to talk about subjects at length, just at a moment's notice.